Somewhere in the United States, you can watch a Russian tomorrow arrive today. Not metaphorically, literally. Step outside on a clear night, look across 3.5 miles of freezing water, and you are looking a full day into the future. This is the Bering Strait, the narrow gap of ocean separating Alaska from Russia. And sitting almost exactly in the middle of it are two small islands, so close together you could see someone waving from one to the other. One island belongs to the United States, the other belongs to Russia, and they are close enough that in winter, when the sea freezes solid, you can, in theory, walk from one country to the other in about an hour. Their names are almost too on the nose: Big Diomede and Little Diomede. But the real story here is not about size. It is about time itself, and about a border that split a single people in half. Little Diomede sits on the American side, home to a tiny Iñupiat village of fewer than 100 people. Big Diomede sits on the Russian side, and today it has no civilian residents at all, only a border guard station and a weather post. Before there was a United States or a Soviet Union, this strait was not a border. It was a bridge, literally. Thousands of years ago, this entire stretch of water was dry land, connecting Asia and North America. Migrating peoples crossed here on foot long before either continent had a name. And even after the ice melted and the water rose, the people who stayed nearby never really stopped crossing. For centuries, the Iñupiat of Little Diomede and the Yupik of Big Diomede were essentially one extended community split across two rocks. They hunted the same walrus, traded the same goods, and married into each other's families. In 1867, the United States bought Alaska from the Russian Empire for about $7.2 million. It is one of history's most famous real estate deals, and almost as an afterthought, it created a brand new international border. Nobody in Washington or St. Petersburg was thinking about a pair of tiny islands in the middle of nowhere. But when the mapmakers drew the new boundary, it happened to run directly through the narrow channel between Big and Little Diomede. For decades, almost nobody enforced it. The border existed on paper, but the people living on these islands kept doing what they had always done: crossing the ice, visiting relatives, hunting together. That freedom would not last. In the 20th century, a much bigger story arrived at this tiny channel, and it would slam a door between two islands that had shared everything for generations. After World War II, the Soviet Union sealed its borders and lowered what became known as the Iron Curtain across Europe. Here, at the very edge of Siberia, a smaller and colder version of that same wall came down. People here call it the Ice Curtain. In 1948, the Soviet Union closed the border at Big Diomede completely, and it did something far more drastic than just posting guards. Soviet authorities forcibly relocated the entire indigenous population of Big Diomede, around 24 families, to villages on the Siberian mainland. The island's original residents never got to go home. Overnight, the two communities that had shared this strait for thousands of years were cut off from each other. Families on Little Diomede could see their relatives' former homes across the water. They just could not reach them anymore. The Bering Strait itself, this narrow strip of water, became one of the most heavily militarized borders on Earth. Not because of what was there, but because of what it represented: the closest physical point between two nuclear superpowers. For 40 years, almost nobody crossed. Big Diomede became a closed military zone. Little Diomede became one of the most isolated inhabited places in the United States, staring across at a country its own residents were forbidden to visit. There is a strange twist to all of this that makes the Diomede Islands even stranger than a simple closed border. It has to do with something almost nobody thinks about when they cross a border: the date on the calendar. The international date line, the imaginary boundary where the calendar flips from one day to the next, happens to run almost exactly through the channel between these two islands. Which means that even though you can see Russia from an American beach here, you are not looking at the same day. Big Diomede is sometimes as much as 21 hours ahead of Little Diomede. Locals call them Tomorrow Island and Yesterday Isle. Stand on the beach of Little Diomede at midday, and the island staring back at you is already living in tomorrow evening. It sounds like science fiction. It is just geography and a line on a map. But for the people actually living here, the date line was never the real story. The real story was always the border and the families it kept apart for 4 decades. On Little Diomede, Almost every family has relatives somewhere in Russia they have never met. Grandparents who remember cousins across the water. Names passed down, but faces that faded from memory. By the 1980s, as Cold War tensions began to thaw elsewhere in the world, a handful of people decided this absurd little border deserved to thaw too. In August 1987, an American long-distance swimmer named Lynne Cox decided to swim the strait herself, from Little Diomede all the way to Big Diomede, through water just above freezing. She made it. Soviet officials, who had granted permission only a day before, welcomed her onto Big Diomede with tea and cookies. For months later, President Reagan and Soviet leader Gorbachev toasted her swim at the White House. It was a small, almost absurd moment, a woman swimming between two islands, and yet it became a genuine symbol that the ice between two superpowers could actually melt. The following year, in June 1988, something even bigger happened. The first official flight in 40 years crossed from Nome, Alaska, to the Russian town of Providenia, carrying Alaska Native elders back toward relatives they had not seen since childhood. It became known as the Friendship Flight. For the first time in 4 decades, cousins, siblings, even parents and children who had been separated by the ice curtain stood face to face again. It did not undo 40 years apart, but it proved something important. The line on the map had never actually erased the people on either side of it. So what does it actually look like to live here today? Big Diomede remains almost exactly as the Cold War left it. No civilians, just a Russian border guard post and a weather station, watching an island directly across from a country it has been sealed off from for over 70 years. Little Diomede, meanwhile, is still home. Around 80 people, mostly Iñupiat, live in the village of Diomede, on the western shore, in one of the most physically isolated communities in the entire United States. There is no harbor and no airstrip in summer. No road connects it to anywhere. Supplies arrive once a year by cargo ship, or by helicopter when the weather cooperates, which in the Bering Strait is not often. In winter, when the sea ice used to form thick and reliable, small planes would land directly on the frozen strait. That ice runway is disappearing. Climate change is making the ice thinner and less predictable every year, cutting off one of the village's last lifelines. And yet, families here have chosen to stay for generations, not despite the isolation, but because this narrow, freezing channel is still, after everything, home. So why does a 3-mile gap of freezing water matter so much? Because it is a reminder that borders are not natural features of the Earth. They are decisions drawn by people who were often nowhere near the place they were dividing. The Diomede Islands did not choose to become a Cold War frontier. A single line, drawn in 1867 by negotiators who had never seen this strait, ended up defining the fate of every family living on it. And when the Cold War arrived, that arbitrary line was suddenly treated as an absolute wall, forcibly separating people who had shared this strait for thousands of years for the crime of living too close to a rival superpower. Even today, Big Diomede and Little Diomede remain functionally close to each other. There is no official crossing. Relatives who want to reconnect still need visas, flights through multiple countries, and a lot of luck. But every so often, on a clear summer day, you can still see a boat from Little Diomede pull close enough to Big Diomede's shore that, just for a moment, the border stops feeling like a wall and starts feeling like what it always was, a few miles of water between family. It is easy to think of borders as permanent, as facts of nature, like mountains or rivers. But the Diomede Islands are proof that most borders are just choices, made once, and then defended long after the reasons for them have faded. 2 islands, 3.5 miles apart. 2 different countries, 2 different days of the week, and 1 family, still separated by a line nobody living today actually drew. That is the real anomaly here. Not the time difference, not the frozen ice bridge. It is how easily a random decision on a map became a permanent wall between 2 neighbors. If you liked this deep dive into one of the strangest borders on Earth, subscribe for more forgotten borders, hidden countries, and geographic oddities with real history behind them. There is a lot more out there most people have never heard of.